Welcome, everyone, to vpod.ai. I'm your host, Mike, and joining me today is our guest expert, Susan. You can sponsor this podcast for just $25. Your message will be featured across major platforms like Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and more. If you're interested, visit vpod.ai to get started today. So, imagine you just ate a massive meal, right? You're completely stuffed. And then out of nowhere, your brain just flips a switch, totally convincing you that you are absolutely starving.
Yeah, it's a very weird experience.
Right. And millions of people experience this exact scenario all the time. And it's usually accompanied by, bright red eyes and a mouth that feels like pure sandpaper.
Oh, exactly. The classic symptoms.
Yeah, exactly. We see these side effects everywhere in pop culture, but honestly, almost nobody knows the actual biological reasons why they happen to your body. So today, we're taking a microscopic look at the cellular hijacking that makes all this possible. We're breaking down the structures, the biological systems, and the deeply misunderstood science of tolerance and addiction for you.
It is genuinely fascinating when you actually look under the hood, biologically speaking.
Oh, for sure.
Because we take those outward symptoms for granted, but to truly understand them, we really have to explore the underlying biological network that THC interacts with when it first enters your body. You can't understand the side effects without understanding the actual system being overridden.
Right. So we're essentially talking about mapping the specific internal hardware, right? The hardware that this compound just plugs right into.
Precisely, yeah. And that starts with understanding the chemistry of the cannabis plant itself.
Okay, lay it on us.
So the plant contains over 100 known compounds, and we call these cannabinoids.
Wait, over 100? I had no idea there were that many.
Yeah. A lot of people are surprised by that sheer number, because the public conversation, it really usually only highlights two of them.
Right, THC and CBD.
Exactly. THC, which is tetrahydrocannabinol, and CBD, or cannabidiol.
The two main stars of the show, basically.
Yeah.
But they play very different roles in your body, right?
Very different roles, yeah. So THC is the primary psychoactive cannabinoid.
Yep.
That's the specific compound responsible for the intoxicating effect, the high. CBD, on the other hand, is considered mostly non-psychoactive. But here is the foundational biology you really need to understand today.
I'm ready.
These cannabinoids, they don't just float around your bloodstream aimlessly hoping to bump into things.
They have a target.
They do. They actively seek out and bind to specific receptors located on the outside of your cells. And we call these cannabinoid receptors.
Okay, so I'm picturing like a key fitting into a very specific physiological lock.
That is actually a brilliant way to visualize it.
Yeah.
Yes. And those biological locks, they're part of a massive, super intricate signaling network inside you called the endocannabinoid system.
The endocannabinoid system, got it.
Right. And there is still, honestly, a tremendous amount of active research happening around this system. But we do know its primary evolutionary function is just keeping your body balanced.
Balanced how? Like chemically?
Basically, yeah. But for our exploration today, you really only need to focus on two main types of receptors in this network.
Okay, what are they?
First, you have CB1 receptors, and these are heavily concentrated in your brain and your central nervous system.
So brain and spinal cord, mostly.
Exactly. Then you have CB2 receptors, and those are primarily located throughout your immune tissues and your peripheral organs.
Oh, okay. So consuming THC isn't just a direct line to your brain then?
Not at all.
Because these CD1 and CB2 receptors are distributed literally everywhere. It's almost more like logging into a cellular Wi-Fi network that just covers your entire body.
I love that analogy. That captures the scale of it perfectly. It is a whole body network.
Wow.
The THC is interacting with tissues from head to toe all simultaneously.
That's wild.
Yeah, and that body-wide distribution is exactly why we see such a wide variety of physical side effects. It's never just a localized neurological event, it's a systemic event.
Okay, so if this Wi-Fi network is everywhere, let's look at one of the most visible giveaways of cannabis use. I really want to picture the mechanics here.
Sure.
We know the heart is involved, right?
Yeah.
But how does a cardiovascular reaction in your chest end up turning your eyes bright red? Like, those seem so disconnected.
It's quite the anatomical domino effect, honestly. Let's trace the signal step by step for you.
Okay, I'm following.
So the heart is this incredible vital organ, obviously constantly pumping blood to keep your tissues oxygenated. When THC is first consumed and it enters your bloodstream, one of its initial physical impacts is an increase in your heart rate.
So your heart starts pumping faster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But simultaneously, the THC is also interacting with the smooth muscle tissue that lines the blood vessels throughout your entire body.
Oh, the plumbing.
The plumbing. And it causes those vessels to relax and dilate.
Wait, let me picture this. If my heart rate spikes, right, and it's pumping more blood per minute, my brain immediately thinks, oh, high blood pressure.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't that be the case here? Am I missing a step in the plumbing?
It absolutely seems counterintuitive at first, but your plumbing analogy is the best way to understand it. Yes, the pump your heart is working faster and pushing more fluid,
Right.
but the pipes, your blood vessels, they have suddenly widened significantly because the THC forced them to dilate.
Oh, because the pipes got wider.
Exactly. Because those vessels relax and open up so much, the overall physical resistance in the entire circulatory system actually drops.
That makes total sense.
So despite the faster heart rate, your overall systemic blood pressure goes down?
Okay, the pipes got wider, so the pressure pushing against the walls drops. But what does a systemic drop in pressure have to do with your eyes turning red?
It has everything to do with the density of the receptors we talked about.
Oh, the CB1 and CB2 locks?
Right. Your eyes, and specifically the really intricate web of blood vessels supplying them, they contain a remarkably high density of those cannabinoid receptors.
Oh, wow. So they're hypersensitive to the THC.
Very much so. When your systemic blood pressure drops, there is suddenly less physical force pushing the blood through the very small blood vessels across your body.
Okay.
So to compensate for this drop in pressure, the tiny blood vessels in the eyes, the capillaries, they begin to dilate significantly.
They open up too.
Yes. And as those tiny ocular vessels open wide, they basically act like a reservoir holding a much larger volume of blood.
Oh, so the blood just sits there.
Right. That pooling of blood in the dilated capillaries is exactly what gives your eyes that highly characteristic bright red appearance.
That is fascinating. So it takes time for the blood to physically pool then.
It does, yes.
That perfectly explains why red eyes don't just happen instantly. Like you don't consume THC and immediately look in the mirror to see red eyes.
No, not at all.
You have to actually wait for the systemic blood pressure to drop and for those vascular pressure changes to physically alter the capillaries in your eyes.
That is the exact sequence of events, yeah. It requires time for the physical compensation to actually occur.
Okay, so if a systemic drop in blood pressure causes the eyes to flood with blood, is that same pressure drop what causes your mouth to dry out?
That's a good guess.
Like, is the body pulling fluids away from the mouth to compensate for the widening pipes?
It's a very logical assumption, but actually no. The mechanism is entirely different.
Oh, really?
Yeah. While the red eyes are the result of a systemic pressure change, the dry mouth is a localized receptor hijack.
A localized hijack. Okay, that makes sense because, for decades there was this massive misconception about this.
Oh, completely.
People assumed that red eyes and dry mouth were just caused by the physical irritation of hot smoke.
Yep, smoke myth.
Right. You pull in hot, dry air from a joint or a pipe, and common sense just dictated that the heat and smoke were physically drying out your mouth and irritating your eyes.
It was an incredibly persistent myth, mostly because it just felt intuitively true.
Right, it feels logical.
But modern science completely dismantled that idea, and honestly, the clearest real-world proof we have is the rise of edibles.
Ugh, of course. You don't smoke a gummy.
Exactly. Once cannabis began to be widely consumed in non-smoked forms, like gummies or baked goods, consumers were still experiencing the exact same profound dry mouth.
So there was zero hot smoke involved.
Zero. Which proved to researchers that something fundamental is happening at a cellular level.
Okay, so if it's not the physical heat of the smoke evaporating the moisture, what is the biological culprit?
The real culprits are your salivary glands.
Salivary glands, okay.
You have an entire system of them, obviously, but two major ones are critical here.
Where are they?
First is the parotid gland, which is the largest one. It's located just beside your ear and your jawline.
Okay.
If you've ever bitten into a lemon and felt that sharp, aching squeeze right at the back of your jaw.
Oh yeah, that weird tingling ache.
Yeah, that is your parotid gland kicking into overdrive.
Wow, okay.
And then you have the submandibular gland, which is nestled right below your lower jawbone.
Got it.
Normally, these glands are constantly at work producing saliva. And saliva doesn't just keep your mouth comfortable, It contains essential enzymes that immediately begin breaking down the carbohydrates in your food.
So they're actively managing digestion and oral health, not just, like, moisture.
Highly active. all the time. But here is the critical physiological intersection for you.
Okay.
These salivary glands are absolutely packed with a high density of cannabinoid receptors.
The locks again.
The locks again. When THC enters your bloodstream, it actively binds directly to the receptors on those specific glands.
Okay, so it plugs in. Then what?
The THC essentially sends a localized chemical signal that aggressively downregulates saliva production.
Just tells them to stop.
Literally, the glands receive a direct message to stop working as hard, less saliva is pushed into the mouth, and your oral cavity inevitably just dries out.
Wow. Think about it like someone walking up to your body's sprinkler system and just turning the main water valve completely off at the source.
That's exactly it.
It's a chemical override, not an environmental drying out.
The water main has been forcefully shut off by the THC. And, it's crucial to point out how the method of consumption drastically alters how quickly the sprinkler system shuts off.
Oh, right, because of how it enters the body.
Yeah. When cannabis is smoked or vaped, the THC enters the lungs and absorbs directly into the bloodstream almost instantly.
So it's super fast.
It is. It reaches the brain and those peripheral salivary glands within minutes, meaning the onset is incredibly fast.
But edibles take a totally different route.
They do. Ingesting an edible forces the THC to travel through your entire digestive tract, and then it has to be processed by the liver first.
Ah, the liver detour.
Right. That metabolic detour is exactly why edibles take so much longer to kick in. However, because of how the liver processes the compound, once those effects finally do take hold, they often last much longer and can feel significantly more intense.
Okay, so we've got the cardiovascular plumbing causing the red eyes, right?
Right.
And we've got a chemical override shutting down the sprinklers in the mouth. How does that explain the sudden, overwhelming urge to eat an entire bag of chips when you're already totally full? Let's unpack the mechanics of the Munchies.
Oh, the Munchies are arguably the most complex cellular interaction of them all.
Really? More than the heart and eyes.
I'd say so. To understand what's going on here, we have to look deep inside your brain at a small, incredibly vital region called the hypothalamus.
The hypothalamus.
Okay.
If we're mapping the hardware, what is its primary function?
You can think of the hypothalamus as your body's ultimate non-stop thermostat.
Thermostat.
Yeah. Its primary biological directive is maintaining homeostasis, basically keeping all your internal systems in perfect balance.
So temperature, stuff like that.
Exactly. It regulates your core body temperature, your baseline hormone levels, and crucially, your innate sense of hunger and thirst.
Okay, so hunger starts there.
It does. Now, deep inside this thermostat, there is a specific cluster of specialized neurons called pro-opiomelanocortin neurons.
Okay, wow. That is quite the label.
It is a mouthful, I know. So neuroscientists usually just abbreviate them as POMC neurons.
POMC neurons, got it.
Yeah.
Much easier.
Yeah. These POMC neurons are the absolute key to the feeling of satiety, which is just the clinical term for feeling full and satisfied after a meal.
Right.
Under normal, balanced conditions, when you eat a large meal, these neurons activate. They send a powerful, very clear signal across your brain that says, I'm full, we have enough calories, you can stop eating now.
So the POMC neurons are basically the body's natural stopping point.
Exactly. But here is the massive physical plot twist when THC enters the brain.
It hijacks the stopping point.
It does. THC actively binds to the cannabinoid receptors located directly on these specific POMC neurons.
Wow.
But it doesn't just sit on the surface, It actually alters the internal signaling inside the neuron itself. It reaches all the way down to interact with the mitochondria.
Wait, the mitochondria. Okay, we usually hear that described as the powerhouse of the cell, but let's be more precise. It's really the engine room, right?
The engine room is perfect.
It's the place generating the actual physical energy the cell needs to do its job.
That is a much more accurate description. The mitochondria are the engine room, providing the exact energy required to transmit that I'm full signal to the rest of the brain.
Right.
So when THC infiltrates the neuron, it essentially sneaks past cellular security and messes directly with the fuse box in that engine room.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it disrupts the delicate energy chain. Because of this profound mitochondrial disruption, the neuron basically panics.
It panics.
It misfires entirely. Instead of producing that normal, healthy, I'm full signal, the disrupted cell triggers a massive release of endorphins.
Endorphins. Wait, so the energy meant to stop your hunger is converted into a chemical that makes eating feel incredible.
Exactly. Those endorphins completely override the physical sensation of being full.
That is insane.
It is, and the chaos doesn't even stop there. Other vital hormones are caught in the crossfire, specifically leptin and ghrelin.
What do those do?
These are the natural hormonal messengers that dictate your hunger and fullness cues throughout the normal day. When THC disrupts the hypothalamus, that delicate hormonal balance is just thrown completely out the window.
Man. So your brain's gas tank is full, light is supposed to come on, but the THC basically rewires the dashboard so the light plays party music instead?
Yes.
Your body is just screaming for calories it absolutely does not need.
You've completely rewired the dashboard. The internal system is desperately telling you to keep going when it really should be telling you to stop.
That is fundamentally altering the body's natural thermostat, which, naturally leads me to a much bigger, much more serious question.
Here, I think I know where you're going.
Yeah. I mean, eating a bag of chips is an acute short-term effect, right? It happens in the moment and then it fades.
Right.
But what happens when you repeatedly hack into this cellular Wi-Fi network and rewire the dashboard over a long period of time?
That is probably the most critical question we can ask about the endocannabinoid system.
Because it's not meant to be hacked every day.
No, it's not. Up to this point, we've just been discussing acute effects, what happens during a single instance of use.
Right.
But with repeated or heavy use, the body is basically forced to change. And this is an area where there is just a massive amount of public confusion.
Totally.
Particularly around three completely distinct terms that people mix together all the time: tolerance, dependence, and addiction.
Let's clearly untangle those for the listener then. Because you're right, people throw those words around interchangeably, and they really represent entirely different biological states.
They represent very different physical realities.
Right.
Let's start with the first biological adaptation: tolerance.
Okay, tolerance.
When you repeatedly consume cannabis, THC is constantly activating those cannabinoid receptors, especially the CB1 receptors that are heavily concentrated in your brain's reward, motivation, and stress regulation centers.
The brain gets flooded.
Now, the brain is incredibly efficient. It recognizes this constant overstimulation and naturally adapts to handle the overload.
So the body is essentially treating the constant THC like a software update it didn't ask for and has to alter the hardware to compensate.
That is exactly what happens, and the primary hardware alteration is downregulation.
Downregulation? Meaning what?
Well, tolerance isn't just your brain becoming intuitively numb to the feeling. It is a literal physical change.
Oh, wow.
The receptors literally retreat into the cell membrane to protect themselves from being constantly bombarded by the THC. They hide.
They hide inside the cell.
Yes. And as a result of having fewer available receptors on the surface, you physically need higher and higher amounts of THC to produce the exact same biological effects you used to get from a much smaller amount.
Wow. So tolerance is the physical retreating of the receptors, meaning you just need a larger dose to achieve the baseline effect.
Exactly.
Okay, what about dependence? How is that a step further?
If the heavy use continues, tolerance progresses into dependence.
Okay.
Dependence is a purely physiological state where your brain has fundamentally established a new baseline.
A new normal.
Right. It has adjusted to the regular, constant presence of THC to the point where it now expects the compound to be there just to function normally.
Oh, I see.
Your endocannabinoid system has actually stopped producing its own natural cannabinoids at normal levels because it's relying on the external THC to do the job.
Because it's getting it for free from the outside.
Exactly. So, if the use suddenly stops, the system is thrown into total chaos. It needs time to recalibrate and start producing its own chemicals again.
What does that physical recalibration actually look like for the person experiencing it? Like, what do they feel?
During that recalibration period, people experience very real physical withdrawal symptoms.
Withdrawal, right.
Chemically, the brain is experiencing a sudden drop in dopamine and a sharp spike in stress hormones.
That sounds awful.
It is. This neurochemical chaos physically manifests as intense irritability, heightened anxiety, a drastically reduced appetite, and really severe disruptions in sleep architecture.
Sleep architecture.
Yeah, people will often have super vivid, intense dreams as their REM sleep rebounds. The brain is just violently trying to find its natural balance without the external substance.
So that is physical dependence, the painful recalibration of the hardware.
Yes.
But how does that physical state differ from actual addiction?
This is the most crucial distinction for you to understand today. Dependence is physiological. Addiction is behavioral.
Behavioral. Okay.
Addiction is a clinical diagnosis officially known as cannabis use disorder.
Cannabis use disorder.
Right. It means the use of the substance continues obsessively despite obvious damaging negative consequences in a person's life.
Oh, I see.
It is characterized by impaired control, intense psychological cravings, and a profound disruption in daily responsibilities. You know, like failing at work, struggling in school, or destroying personal relationships.
It's the destructive behavioral fallout, not just the physical baseline adjustment.
Precisely. You can absolutely have physical dependence like experiencing irritability and insomnia when you stop without meeting the behavioral criteria for addiction.
Okay, that makes sense.
Cannabis use disorder exists on a clinical spectrum, ranging from mild to highly severe.
Do we have a sense of the actual hard numbers on this? Because the public perception of how addictive this compound is, it varies wildly depending on who you talk to.
The data actually provides a very clear picture.
Okay.
When we look at lifetime risk population data, it shows that roughly 1 in 10 adults who use cannabis will develop dependence or meet the criteria for cannabis use disorder at some point.
1 in 10. I mean, that is a noticeable chunk of the adult population.
It is a lot of people. However, the data reveals something much more alarming regarding age.
Age.
Yeah. If cannabis use begins during adolescence, that risk profile jumps dramatically. For those who start using in their teens, the risk of developing a disorder increases to about 1 in 6.
1 in 6. Wait, why is there such a massive jump just based on starting a few years earlier?
It all comes down to neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity.
Right. An adolescent brain is not a finished product. It is actively developing, pruning neural pathways, and cementing its permanent baseline for reward and stress regulation.
So it's still being wired.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exposing that highly vulnerable developing brain to high levels of exogenous cannabinoids forces it to wire itself around the presence of the drug.
That's terrifying.
The developing brain is simply much more susceptible to permanent adaptations. To give you a sense of the sheer scale of this today, in 2020, an estimated 14 million people in the United States met the criteria for cannabis use disorder.
14 million.
By 2023, just 3 years later, that number had surged to roughly 19 million people.
19 million people experiencing actual behavioral disruption.
Wow.
It's significant.
I do want to weigh the risks fairly here for everyone listening, though, because the debate is so polarized.
Sure.
How does this genuinely stack up against other substances? Context is essential here, you're right. The overall risk of developing a severe, life-threatening addiction to cannabis is definitively lower than it is for highly destructive substances like nicotine, alcohol, or opioids.
Right.
Alcohol and opioids carry a profoundly higher risk of severe physical dependence, catastrophic organ failure, and lethal overdoses. They contribute to a vastly greater burden of mortality. Cannabis falls significantly lower on the danger spectrum.
Okay, so it's a lower risk compared to the heavy hitters that cause fatal overdoses.
Lower risk, unequivocally. But, and this is key, lower risk does not mean zero risk.
Right.
It is a critical biological error to assume THC is entirely harmless. Many people use cannabis their entire lives without ever developing significant problems. However, THC is not biologically neutral.
Because it actively hijacks the system.
It aggressively interacts with vital neural circuits. And just like any complex system in the human body, when you repeatedly hammer it with stimulation, especially with the high-potency products available today, the system is forced to adapt.
And those forced adaptations often compromise the very balance the system was originally built to maintain.
Beautifully said. Yes.
Well, let's bring all of this together. We have mapped an incredible amount of internal hardware today. We've seen how THC operates as a whole-body cellular Wi-Fi network, binding to CB1 and CB2 receptors from head to toe.
Right.
We trace the cardiovascular plumbing, revealing how a faster heart rate paradoxically lowers your systemic blood pressure, which dilates the tiny capillaries in your eyes and floods them with blood.
And we dismantled the hot smoke myth, proving that the infamous dry mouth is actually a localized chemical override, shutting down saliva production right at the parotid and submandibular glands.
Exactly. And we went deep into the engine room of the hypothalamus, detailing how THC literally rewires your POMC neurons by disrupting their mitochondria, overriding your body's natural satiety signals, and basically unleashing a flood of endorphins that cause the munchies.
It's quite the cascade.
It really is. Finally, we untangled the critical biological differences between receptors retreating to cause tolerance, the painful neurological recalibration of dependence, and the destructive behavioral fallout of true addiction.
It's all connected. From the salivary glands to the brain's delicate thermostat, this endocannabinoid system is an intricate network that evolved over millennia to keep us perfectly in balance.
And repeatedly overriding it forces adaptations that might permanently change your baseline.
Understanding the machinery inside you is really the only way to make informed decisions about what you expose that machinery to. The biology dictates the outcome.
It always does.
Yeah.
And that brings me to a final provocative thought I want to leave you with today. Something to just mull over long after this finishes.
I'm curious.
If your body naturally relies on this vast endocannabinoid system to seamlessly regulate your hunger, your stress levels, and your overall biological balance, how might your daily non-substance habits, like what you eat, your baseline stress, or how intensely you exercise, be subtly hacking this exact same internal network every single day without you even realizing it?
That is a fascinating question.
Something to think about. Until next time, stay curious.